Getting impatient for baseball season to start? Have a touch of spring fever? Want to get away from it all? We offer you
the soul of Detroit.
You asked it around, get the finger out of my face. It's gone.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Come on.
That is not paid for by them. That is paid for by the people of Detroit.
You might be qualified, ML.
I'm not qualified for this job.
Let me tell you something. You want to go right now? Okay? You want to go right now?
Hey kids, it's your old pal ML Elric, and we are not shooting a documentary. But if you are a Patreon subscriber for as little as $5 a month, you can watch this show and every show that we have broadcast. And this might be a time to open up those wallets, you cheapskates, because we have a very special guest, Mariell Lehman, who was the defense attorney for James Crumbley, who tough case, a historic case with basically everybody in Michigan cheering against her, defended her client, and maybe back in court at some point. At least her client, I think, is going to be back in court, because I don't think we are done with the Crumbley case. So Mariell is here to join us to talk about something that I think people still are thinking about, because it's a case that just kind of resonates. So thanks for joining us, Mariell.
Thanks for having me.
And Marc Fellhauer's here. He is very excited that we had a very simple intro this week.
Oh, my God. It was so great. You hear how short and sweet that was? It was awesome. I loved it. Thank
no
you.
video, though. So, I figured with a real easy intro, you maybe could have, risen above.
Maybe you're turning over a new leaf.
Really?
A kinder, gentler boss.
Making things easy. I'm not a boss. This is a collective. This is like a co-op. It's like one of those shitty co-ops where the
In name only.
food is more expensive
We all
than
know who's
everywhere
in
else,
charge.
and a lot of it's rotten. And when you complain to the manager, say, "Hey, dude, it's ours. It's not a corporation you're bitching at. It's your brother's." But we should still demand excellence, which is why we don't have Sean with us today.
Yeah, it's very sad.
He is officially taking a week off, so that's
He needs it.
That's a big change. He's going to recharge, because when you maintain that level of energy on such a regular basis, you do need to kind of be nice to yourself. You do have to take that pause for poise. So Sean will be back with us next week. And next week, we are expecting to have Rob Parker join us, who's launching a new Black sports talk radio station, which is going to be hitting the air pretty soon here in Detroit. You probably know Rob. He's quite a fascinating but polarizing figure, so we can't wait to hear what he's doing. So that's next week. Sean and Rob, make sure you make plans to join us. But this week we're here because of the generosity of Dr. Yaldo, who can help you see better than 2020. Marc and I have both had LASIK surgery, so we know that 2015 is better than 2020, and wearing glasses and contacts is not so 2015, it's actually so 1915. So get with the times. We will tell you how to get your eyes fixed with the Dr. Yaldo. If you're looking for a more secure future, just some expert advice on how to handle your finances, Luke Nowacki and Pinnacle Wealth Strategies is our recommendation. We'll tell you a little later on how Luke can help you prepare for a comfortable future. And if you want, if you want a piece of me, come play Detroit is where you can find me playing softball, volleyball, and all kinds of sports in the great city of Detroit. We'll tell you not only how to get in the game, but how to save some dough when you register. And then, of course, Patreon. That's where you support the show. You are our most important part of the show as a listener, as someone who supports what we do. If you'd like to be a sponsor, you go from being really important to like really super, very important, just like when you go to those Chinese restaurants and it's not just amazing prawn, it's super amazing prawn. You could be the super, really, truly amazing prawn of the soul of Detroit. Right, Marc?
Yeah, sure. That's a very odd analogy.
Marc's just a regular.
But I'll take it.
He's just a prawn in this chess game that
Yep.
we play. This is all workshop. This is carefully crafted.
None of it will be edited either.
Oh, really?
Why even bother? No, not one bit.
I thought that was our... See, this is...
I don't like editing.
One of the things I like about seeing people in the courtroom is they say something they don't like. They strike that. Go back. Read that back to me. I didn't say that. Get rid of that. And then people do. So it's kind of cool. But don't try that here.
Oh, I won't.
Okay, good.
I won't.
Want to make sure we have order here because I know you know Mike Ratai and he doesn't listen to anybody. So
I do.
So I want to make sure not too much of that rubbed off. But how are you feeling? This was a epic case. This was something that went on for months, perhaps for years for you, and it's over. At least the trial is over. And I know it didn't end the way that you had hoped, or probably the way you thought it should have ended. Is there just like utter exhaustion, or do you go into kind of a funk just, going back over and say, what if we'd done this, or what if that had happened, or what if the judge had ruled in this way, or if this witness had, or even if the kid had been able to testify? I personally can't believe this case went forward without the kid being able to testify, because he changed his mind at the very last minute, which I gotta believe threw a total curveball to what you guys had planned.
Yeah, so to go back, it has been a couple of years. I started representing James in December of 2021, when all of this kind of started after the shooting at the high school. So it's been about 2.5 years. The trial absolutely did not go the outcome was not what I wanted it to be. There was a lot that went on during the trial that I really don't know how the jury found the way that they did. I just don't know. And absolutely not having my client's son allowed to testify, that definitely had a huge impact.
Is that grounds for an appeal?
Well, there is an appeal. There is an appeal pending right now. He signed the paperwork when we were at sentencing in early April. So there is an appeal pending. It could be grounds. His appellate attorney will make those decisions.
But is that something where when the judge says, now we're going forward, where you can stand up and say, Your Honor, this is a key part of our case. This is what we've been preparing for. If this kid doesn't testify, we cannot do our best for our client. This is an injustice if we go forward. And then, I don't know, you throw a chair or something, and something very Al Pacino-esque. Does that happen?
There's a lot of chair throwing.
Oh, really?
In real life court, yeah. Yeah, we throw chairs all the time. You just don't see it. Yeah. We were on our good behavior because the cameras were there.
Maybe we should charge your parents.
Yes, you probably should.
They didn't tell you about that. I didn't know you're Bobby Knight's kid.
I am.
Oh, damn.
Yep. So in all seriousness, there were decisions made. There were motions filed. I filed motions regarding the son testifying and some of the information that would come out if he didn't testify, if he did testify, and the impact that had on my client's trial and his rights, quite frankly.
But you went forward anyways. Did you have any choice in that matter?
Not really.
No. So the judge said, yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, the motions were denied.
Call your first witness.
Yeah, the judge reviewed the motions. The motion, she issued orders denying motions, granting motions, either way, and we proceeded to trial in March.
So one of the things that I've never seen before, and I don't watch criminal proceedings on a daily basis like a lot of other reporters who really are well-grounded in the criminal justice system, but I couldn't believe that up until a week before the trial started that we didn't know who was going first. Was it going to be your client, Ethan Crumbley's father, or his mother? Have you ever been in a situation like that?
No, that was a first. We had been communicating with the court. Both sides, both attorneys were in communication with the prosecutor's office. We were all kind of communicating, but ultimately it was going to be the judge's decision which trial proceeded first. And we found out pretty much when everyone else did.
Which, can you say which you would have preferred, to go first or second?
I didn't have a preference.
Didn't matter at all?
It didn't.
Okay. Well,
no, my case was going to go forward the same way either way.
I just think the Tigers wouldn't.
But there are some advantages. I mean, Jennifer Crumbley took the stand. James did not. I mean, you had to have learned things from her trial. I mean, you would think always going second or batting second would be a benefit.
I don't know that it is always a benefit. I think that especially in situations where there's the potential for one to be convicted and one not, or both to be acquitted, and it doesn't go the way that you want it to on either case, I think that it can be detrimental. It can be beneficial. It's really, I knew what my defense was going to be, and that wasn't going to change regardless of who went first. And as for decisions regarding testifying and not testifying, I don't know that had anything to do with what happened during Jennifer's trial. Now, there were benefits. There were things that I saw that I heard about. I didn't watch all of Jennifer's trial, but there were things that I saw and heard about, especially related to the number of exhibits that the prosecution was seeking to admit during Jennifer's trial. So I was able to kind of get in front of that during my trial, which was, in my opinion, a huge benefit to going second.
Well, it does seem like the Shannon Smith, who was the attorney for Jennifer Crumbley, had some issues with the prosecution basically dumping discovery, which is the evidence that the prosecution has against the accused. Typically, now the feds sometimes will dump evidence at the last minute, and I hear lots of federal defenders get angry about that, and I can understand why. But generally, from what I've seen in the state court, you get all the evidence well in advance of the trial, and here it was kind of coming out, and it was voluminous, and it was hard to process, and that seems to have been something that really concerned Shannon Smith as she tried to defend Jennifer Crumbley. I guess you had a little more time. You got to see, I guess, to go back to a baseball analogy, I was going to say the Tigers wouldn't come to the ballpark and say, one of you guys is pitching tomorrow. We'll tell you when you get your cleats on. To use another baseball analogy, the prosecution tips its pitches a little bit. You can kind of see what they've got and what they're doing if you have somebody else going first. But that just seemed like a strange thing for me in a state case. I have not seen that sort of, I don't know if it's a strategy or if it was, I mean, there's so much time to prepare for this as a prosecutor. Why wouldn't you have had all that ready and given to the defense before day one?
Well, and we got discovery and discovery materials throughout the 2+ years that this case was pending. So we would regularly get discovery materials from the prosecutor's office. It seemed like the biggest issue was the number of trial exhibits that were seeking to be admitted during Jennifer's trial and also during my trial, during James's trial. And I think that was where some of the issue was. It sounds like, from what I heard, there were some issues with the materials that were given to Shannon, that they weren't the right materials, that the prosecution sought to admit different exhibits during the trial than what Shannon thought they were going to admit. So that sounded like that was the bigger issue. It was documents that were within the discovery, but again, the discovery was so voluminous. It was tens of thousands of pages of discovery from the beginning to right before trial. So
I want to be fair to the prosecutor. So did they give you guys all the discovery beforehand? I mean, do you feel that they did what they were supposed to there?
I believed that they did. We learned after the trial that there were some materials that we didn't receive.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Well, and again, it became public the Sunday after James's trial that there were some sort of agreements that the prosecution had with two of the trial witnesses from the school. And that should have been disclosed prior to the trial.
So what did you do when you found out about that? Is that when the chair throwing recommenced?
Yes. That's when I started acting like my relative, Bobby, over there.
The metaphorical chair throwing.
Correct. Yeah, and obviously those are appellate issues. So those are things that can be taken up on appeal, and what James's appellate attorney is going to do with it, that would be their decision.
You know, it seems when we see courtroom dramas on TV that it's very adversarial. But in my experience, generally the prosecution and the defense have more of a collegial relationship where there aren't too many rugs pulled out from under people or surprises sprung. In this case, it seemed like the prosecutor was constantly surprising you guys or doing things that I haven't seen that often. Is that the way you saw it? And if so, what was going on there? What do you think was happening?
I felt that way from the beginning. I felt from the time that it was announced that charges were even being considered, and then that charges were going to be filed, that we were already at odds with the prosecutor's office. And I hadn't experienced that before in my career. And obviously everybody got to see it. And I think that theme kind of carried throughout the trial. It was constantly making our clients look bad, constantly making them look bad in the public eye, saying things that weren't necessarily true, saying things that weren't backed by the facts and the information in the discovery, and doing everything they could to make our clients look as bad as possible. And I don't know if that was their approach to their tactic, their trying to get some sort of an advantage in the case. But it did feel very much that we had a very adversarial relationship from the very beginning. And that is not normally how my cases go.
To the point of media coverage, I mean, this was on Court TV. I watched a lot of it streaming everywhere, and the coverage was overwhelming. I know attorneys will always say, we're not trying this in the court of public opinion, but you've got to be very aware of what's being told and the narrative that is going on out there. What things do you think were overblown or we just didn't get right watching, say, news coverage or reading the great free press?
One of the big things, I think, was the assertion and the belief that James and Jennifer were these horrific parents and that they were neglectful and they were terrible and that they had all of this knowledge about their child that they just completely ignored for their own selfish reasons. And that was a theme that began early on. It began early on with the claims that they were running, that they were retaining counsel instead of getting an attorney for their child, that the way that they reacted during police interviews, the way that they reacted when they saw their son. And it was something that we tried to combat early on, which is why we asked the court to kind of shut down the media coverage and the statements to media, because it just kept getting blown out of proportion and exaggerated in ways that we couldn't combat. We could say what was true. We could tell the courts and the media, and we didn't really give media comments in the beginning, but we could tell the courts what was true. But it seemed that the prosecutor just kind of had everyone's ear, and the prosecutor's office had everyone's ear, and whatever they said was truth to the public. And the truth of the matter is those things aren't true. And that was what I covered a lot during my trial. James was not an absentee parent. He wasn't selfishly ignoring his child. He was involved in his child's life. He didn't see signs that were concerning. He did everything that he could as a parent to be a good father. And was he perfect? No, but no parent is perfect. And I think that his imperfections that most likely every parent has in our state and in our country, were made public and exploited in a way to make him look as bad as possible in the public eye. And truthfully, it seemed that there was no way to combat it. There was just no way for us to combat it. Even if we were to go to the media and give statements and allow James to make statements, which I would have never done, we just wouldn't have been able to combat it. We couldn't even combat it during the trial.
But what about those folks who say, listen, the people, because the prosecution, when they bring charge, it's the people versus James Crumbley. If they legitimately believe that James and Jennifer Crumbley are criminally responsible for playing a crucial role in a massacre, that they are bad people who have broken the law, why shouldn't they use every single tool at their disposal to make sure that these people who they believe are terrible and criminal are somehow punished and taken out of the public domain where they may be able to, I don't know, wreak further havoc on us?
Because within days of that shooting, there's no way that anyone could have even known or believed that they were a part of this massacre. Because the charges, it was announced, I believe, 2 days after the shooting that the prosecutor's office was considering charges against James and Jennifer. Within 3 days of the shooting, the charges were announced. It is impossible. As I said a little bit ago, we were getting discovery for 2 years. It is impossible that the prosecutor's office or the police could have formed a belief that they were this integral, crucial part of this massacre and deserved to be criminally responsible for the behaviors. I think that belief was formed early on with very, very limited information, and it had to be pushed.
So why? Why did they do that?
Why did who?
Why did the prosecutor, the police, whomever, decide so early? Why was there, it sounds like in your mind, a rush to judgment against these parents?
I personally think that would be a question better posed to the prosecutor's office.
Well, if I was with a documentary film crew, I would have asked her that, but I was not invited on the shoot. But, if you don't mind speculating, what do you think was going on with Karen McDonald?
I think that there was no way to get a conviction if James and Jennifer could be viewed as your everyday average parent with a teenager. They had to be portrayed and viewed in the general public as monsters, as crucial, integral parts of a massacre of children that were absent, that were bad people, that were selfish, that were all of these things. Without that narrative, the public could not have viewed them the way that they did. Because truthfully, there were people in the public that were very supportive of James and Jennifer. Unfortunately, they couldn't express that support without being threatened and crucified on social media and other places. There were people who were afraid to even show support because they were afraid of the backlash that they were going to receive. So there had to be that negative light around James and Jennifer, or people were going to see them as a parent of a teenager.
I'm going to look at it from my perspective. Granted, I'm not on the jury. I didn't watch all the trial. I watched a lot of it. And ML, you remember this. I was shocked that the parents were charged, mainly because who could ever think their kid would do the most horrific act, imaginable, which is killing other kids and shooting them. But then I think it kind of works against him when you say he's an attentive father, because if you were that attentive, you would know the problems he has going on. And the thing that flipped it for me was watching the video of the house and how many places there were unlocked guns. He didn't know the code. And it's like, okay, he should have known better. And that's why he was convicted. What am I getting wrong there? Because yeah, it's never really happened like this before where somebody gets charged. But then, he seemed neglectful, because if you were that attentive of a parent, you would know to keep this guy away from guns. And I thought the gun culture argument up in Oxford is a fair argument too. A lot more hunters, and that's just the way it is up there. So what am I getting wrong?
But you don't hunt with a 9mm. I know you're not a gun guy.
I know,
Mark,
but it's the gun culture, right? If you're more comfortable around rifles or shotguns, then you're going to be more comfortable around handguns.
And I think too that we often forget, today, it may not be the most popular way to store a firearm that it isn't stored locked in a safe or with a trigger lock or a cable lock or whatever, any number of ways you can lock a firearm. When we were younger, when our parents had firearms when we were younger, they weren't always locked up. We were taught that we weren't allowed to touch them, and we didn't. And for people who grow up in that environment where they're told you don't touch firearms, you don't touch them, we assume our children are going to do the same thing.
Was Ethan never told that? Because to the contrary, they took him shooting.
Right. But he was not supposed to be touching and handling those firearms unsupervised. That's why they were not kept in his room or somewhere where he was accessing them, in the common area of the home. They weren't kept in the common area of the home. They were kept in the parents' bedroom. So they weren't accessible to him in their minds. They weren't accessible to him. Now, what he was doing that they didn't have knowledge of, that's different. They didn't have knowledge that he was accessing those firearms without supervision, without permission. They did take him to the fire range. That's how you teach about firearm safety. And if you recall during the trial, the ATF agent even testified there's a number of ways to safely store a firearm. It isn't just with a cable lock or a trigger lock or in a safe. It can be stored unloaded with the ammo stored separately. It can be stored hidden away somewhere. In his mind, that wasn't necessarily his preferred way to store firearms, and he testified about that. But just storing them the way that the firearms were stored or otherwise, it doesn't make it inherently dangerous.
Sure, but when you know that your child might be having some mental issues, then you need to take the extra. I mean, it's not just one thing. It's all of it. I mean, I think the jury felt that way too.
Well, and if you look at the evidence that was presented, it was the morning of the shooting where there was even a suggestion that he was experiencing, that their son was experiencing any sort of mental issues. And it wasn't a dangerous mental issue. It was he's experiencing levels of sadness that we're concerned about because of the loss that he's had in his life. We want him to talk to somebody because of the loss. We don't want it to get worse. So even then, in the school testified, he's not we didn't believe he was a danger to anyone else. We just wanted him to get help so that it didn't get worse. So even that morning, there's no suggestion that he's dangerous. There's no suggestion that he's handling firearms unsupervised. There's no suggestion that he's going to harm anyone. His behavior during that meeting was normal according to the school. He wanted to stay in school. He expressed his desire to stay in school. So there was no concern.
Which did one parent, and I don't know if you can even say, but did one of them really push the fact of he's going back to class over the other?
I believe the testimony, it wasn't that the parents were pushing it. It was he was asking. He wanted to go back to class because he didn't want to miss any assignments. During that meeting, he'd asked for the staff to get his assignments and his homework from class so he could work on it while he was waiting.
Do you think that the case would have turned out differently if after leaving that meeting with the counselors, one or both of the Crumbleys had sped home and said, boy, kid seems kind of upset. He's doing drawings with guns. Let's just make sure we can count all the gats to make sure everything's where we think it is. And then they went and called the school and said, hey, we just came out of a meeting with our kid. He seems a little bummed out, and we can't find one of our guns. So word to the wise, let's keep an eye on old EC here.
Well, I think if that had happened and the school had ignored it, then yeah, I think the case would have turned out differently. But again, there was no reason to rush home and go looking for anything in James's mind, because there were no concerns that he was going to steal firearms or handle them or take them to school and do what he did. There was no concern. The sadness, yeah, it was sadness. James was sad too. He'd lost his mom. They'd lost their family dog. Like, there had been losses. That wasn't...
Christy Nome was not a suspect in the death of that dog, by the way. I don't want to take us off track, but that dog died of natural causes.
He did.
But okay, so that's all well and good. But at the same time, so I'll just tell you a story that I know about from one of my kids' friends, whose parents are gun owners, and they're responsible gun owners, and they have a gun in their house that was unsecured, or the kid knew how to get to it. And one time, this kid was sitting there with the gun and was feeling sad and was going to kill themselves. And by the grace of God, they didn't. And I don't know if their parents even know this story. And they moved on with it. But a lot of times what we hear about is gun deaths are suicides, where kids who are sad say, well, I know where the gun is and I know how to make the pain stop. I might have rushed home to say, I want to make sure where those guns are so that my kid doesn't kill himself. I don't know that any of us would sit here thinking, oh, my kid's capable of shooting up the school. I mean, if we thought that, we'd probably, put the kid in the basement and homeschool him. No offense to the homeschoolers out there. But I would be worried about my kid hurting himself.
And I don't know that was ever, again, I don't know that was ever a concern. I don't know that...
Didn't he say he had to finish his DoorDash? Isn't that what we've been told? Or is that more prosecutor railroading?
So I believe that the testimony and the evidence showed that there was a statement that they had to return to work. And they did. They did believe that they had to return to work. And again, it wasn't portrayed to them. The severity of the situation was not portrayed to them by the school. The school, the testimony from the school was that the drawings were normal, that kids typically draw violent things on their homework, that those things were not concerning to them. What was concerning was the conversation and the words that were on some of the homework, and then the conversation after about the level of sadness. But even then, there was no behavioral issues. There were no disciplinary issues. It was none of that. It was, he's sad. We want him to get help. And the parents were like, well, we have to go back to work. Do we have to do it today? And they're like, well, no, within a couple of days. Okay, fine. We'll do it within a couple of days. They took the resources that they were given and they intended to follow through. Unfortunately, a couple hours later, their decision was made for them.
So do you feel then that the school officials are more culpable for what happened after this meeting concluded than the Crumbleys themselves?
I think that the school officials have done everything they could to make themselves look as minimally culpable as possible. I think that if you are going to charge parents who don't have knowledge of what their child is going to do, but you don't charge the school who took no steps to ensure that everything was fine and that there were no issues with the student, I think you're setting a dangerous precedent there. And I think you're giving license to schools to do a lot of things.
And what role do you think the prosecutor's agreement with school officials not to prosecute them, what impact do you think that had on the case and on everything that happened afterward?
I think it had a significant impact on my case. I can't speak for Shannon Smith. I would assume that she would probably tell you the same thing, though. Not knowing that agreement, that document, that whatever they want to call it, not knowing that even existed, had a significant impact on the way I presented my case and my defense.
What would you have done if you'd known about that?
I would have probably done a lot of things differently. Specifically what, I can't say for sure, but I would have done things differently.
I mean, do you get out there and say, you're on the stand, did this agreement have anything to do with your testimony today? Are you influenced because you were given a break by the prosecution, you're being let off the hook, blah, blah? I mean, would you go all Perry Mason on them, or?
I'd like to say yes. I know.
I mean,
that,
is that what something like that would have done? Is you basically impeach the objectivity of the witness,
there could have been questioning the witnesses about it, bringing that to the jury's attention.
or would the witnesses have declined to testify because like, well, it might be. I mean, like old Ethan decided he didn't want to testify because he may say something that could be used against him later.
They could have. They could have chose to assert their Fifth Amendment right.
And then how does that affect the case?
They don't testify. They don't testify about the things that they're asserting their rights over, which it could have had a huge impact on the defense in favor of the defense. The jury may not have cared, but I don't believe that that's true. I think that, I don't think it's true. I think that not having that information going into trial had a significant negative impact on my ability to present a full and complete defense for James.
And you would have used it if you known about it.
Yeah,
it would have been a big deal.
I can't imagine I wouldn't have.
Okay.
I can't imagine I wouldn't have.
Okay.
You mentioned how people were afraid to speak up because they would get a lot of shit on, just in their personal lives or especially on social media, though that's not really real, so that doesn't count. How much crap have you gotten? I mean, just going around town, do people recognize you and go, oh, you're that person that represented the parent of that shooter? I mean,
it's funny. People think that I get recognized all the time because of
after this show.
I will now, yes.
Thanks to our many Patreon subscribers for only $5 a month.
I don't know that I'll be able to walk out the
Enjoying
door
the
without
video.
being recognized today.
Yeah, right.
But most of the attention that I received, most of the, I guess you can call it attention, was usually in print or in typing. I got emails, I got messages through my website, I got
Keyboard cowards.
keyboard, yep.
Okay.
Keyboard warriors, keyboard cowards, whatever you want to
I
call
don't
them.
want to call them warriors because warriors actually have to go fight somebody. But these guys with the keyboards, holy crap. I'd
Yeah.
love to see one of them on the street someday. They'd have a stain in their pants where they crap themselves.
I had about...
They're tough. They're
I
tough
had
in mom's basement.
They are. And I had about 2.5 years of people telling me what they thought about me and who I am as a person and what I do for a living and who I'm defending. And unfortunately, a lot of that is because of the narrative that was put out by the prosecution. Because if it had been told from the beginning what the truth was and the types of people that Jennifer and James are, I don't think that people would have been nearly as vicious and angry as they were. There was a lot that went on in 2.5 years when it came to what people thought about me. And I'm going to say this now, and I've said it before to my family and my friends, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't go back and decline the case. I wouldn't go back and make the decision not to represent James. And I would do it again tomorrow if somebody came to me because, in my opinion, this prosecution was wrong. And I believe that James and Jennifer are both innocent and should have never been convicted. So, and I will continue to fight for James and others, regardless of what the people behind the keyboard think of me.
So a lot of people have said, and we may have even said it on this show, that we don't know whether James and Jennifer Crumbley are criminally liable for what happened. But we didn't really feel very good about them. That whether we thought they should go to prison, whether or not we thought they should go to prison, we didn't think we'd really like them very much. But you sound like you like them. What are we missing here?
I know them outside of the prosecution's version of who they are. And I know them outside of what people, the prosecution and people who don't like them, want all of us to think that they are. And the truth of the matter is, I do like them. They're parents. They're not perfect, but they're parents. And I've talked to people while this case was pending in sense, and they think about how they would feel if some of their text messages or messages to their significant other or friends or family got out about their marriage or their kids or their decisions or what do we need to do now to protect ourselves in case anything ever happens. And I don't think they're bad people. They're not bad people. They're very good people, James and Jennifer. They were thrust into a situation that they never saw coming. That I don't think any parent, I think it was said early on, I think Mark might have said it early on, no parent thinks that their child is capable of doing what he did, what their
Mark
son
wishes
did.
he'd said that earlier, but
I said that.
Did
I
you?
thought it was Mark.
Yeah.
I thought I said it too.
Yeah. The problem is
Damn it. Where's Sean? Sean.
is that when there's flags that you have to take more precaution, and it didn't appear that they did.
But the question is, what are those flags? And when does it
Mental
become a
health
flag?
issues. I look, I don't have a gun in the house. I won't have a gun in the house because I have little kids, and I don't think anything good comes of it. I'm pretty secure. I'm fortunate enough where I live. But that's just because, and I couldn't imagine having a kid that, if I'm that attentive of a parent, knowing that they would have mental issues of having weapons in the house. And I think that's just kind of where the case fell apart, in my opinion.
And I think I think there are people who feel that way as well. Obviously, the jury convicted. We heard that the jury had different reasons for why they convicted, but I think it's difficult when we say, well, there were red flags. Well, what were the red flags? Because according to the school, he was sad. There were no red flags. He wasn't dangerous to anybody. They repeatedly said that. The school has repeatedly said that over and over again, that they didn't believe he was a threat to anyone.
The parents should know more than the school, though. And I don't think the
and
school...
a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, and I don't think the school... Drew and I have argued about this a lot. I mean, they should not be off the hook as much as they have been so far. That being said, everything starts with the parent. I mean, you hear that all the time in every argument, that I should have a say. The parent is the one that knows the kid the best, and that's unfortunately what happened.
But doesn't that argument go both ways?
What, that the school should know him better?
Nope. That if the parent knows their child the best, then maybe they know that their child isn't having the significant issues that the school may be believing that the child has.
Well, fair, but I don't think they were reading the signals correctly, in my opinion. And
Certainly somebody missed it because everybody thought it'd be okay to send them back to school, and there's a lot of families who are missing their kids because they were wrong.
Right. And that's something too, and I don't want any of my comments to be taken as an excuse or trying to lessen
oh God, no. Yeah.
what happened. And I think that I made that very clear during my trial was I acknowledge and recognize what those families have gone through and what they continue to go through. I can't pretend to understand what they're experiencing. So I don't want my comments to be taken.
Anybody who understands the American system of justice cannot be angry at the defense attorneys because we're all entitled to have an advocate to give us every chance to have our case put out there. The American system is built so that taking away your freedom is one of the hardest things that you can do. In the same way it's hard to take away your property and your money. You need to have an advocate. The burden of proof is on the prosecution. So I can understand that people have lost someone, are upset that someone would say that the Crumbleys are good people, that they deserve a chance, or they give every consideration. But you know what? If you are in trouble, that's exactly who you want to be there for you because you are entitled. If we are going to lock your ass up, we should be damn well sure that you're guilty. And so you have to have a vigorous advocate. And one of the things that has troubled me about this case, regardless of the outcome, because I didn't hear all the evidence, so I'm not fit to judge. But when the Crumbleys were locked up and their bond was denied, if they had been found innocent, no matter what happened, they would have lost that time. I'm sure. I guess we heard a lot about their horses. Who took care of their horses? Who cut their grass? Who paid their mortgage? Who looked after? Who else in the family was relying on them? What happens in a case like that? Is it, I'm locked up, I'm not getting out. Well, the house is gone. Sorry about Trigger. Let's send him over to the glue pot because I can't feed him or curry comb him or do whatever the hell people who have horses do. I guess pick up giant shit. I don't know why people want such a big pet. I got 4 dogs and it's killing me. But I mean, what happens?
There are like 8 tangents in this question.
Well, no, it all comes back to you don't think about the things that don't get taken care of when you're not available to take. Who pays the water bill?
That's why you get a good attorney.
No, but even if you have a great attorney, if you're locked up, not only are you deprived of your ability to earn, who's paying the attorney?
I got to tell you, if I was locked up, those things just would be the least of my concern.
No, but I think of those things.
Other people
but
take care of them.
if you're acquitted and you come back and you say, well, that sucked. I'm free, but at least I can go home. Oh, wait a minute, I don't have my home anymore.
Well, I'm always back to your other point. I'm always amazed. People want to become.
I want to know what happens with. What did these guys do?
All right,
how do you do that?
Answer that first.
And you can be brief because Mark's impatient, even though he did say something
there
smart
was like
earlier.
15 questions.
That's
there.
okay. I think that the horses were sold.
Okay.
And the house was sold. They didn't have anything. Everything was taken. So they didn't have anything.
So if they'd been
Some personal
acquitted
property.
or there's a hung jury, they would have come out and they'd have had shit.
Yes.
Damn.
Yes.
That's pretty dramatic.
If they had been granted bond, the same thing would have happened.
I was going to ask because when people want to go and litigate, and I don't know why you got into it, but a lot of people see it and how it's presented in TV and movies, and people want to be the good guy, they want to be the prosecutors. So why criminal defense? Why did you go that route?
I am so glad that you asked me that question.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
That was not set up. That's a legit question.
It actually is a legit question, and it's funny that you asked that. So I have wanted to be a lawyer since I was in second grade. I don't know why, but I've wanted to be a lawyer.
Probably not a lot of fun at parties.
I wasn't, but there's actually like pictures of me with a lawyer name tag. It's very funny.
Okay, definitely not fun at parties.
I was not. So I wanted to be a prosecutor. I wanted to be a prosecutor for the majority of my life, including through law school. And I wanted to be a prosecutor because I wanted to lock up all the bad guys. And I got into constitutional law. Con Law 1 actually is where it started to shift. And I started to realize why we had some of the laws and the cases that we had, like Miranda versus Arizona and other cases related to that.
One of my personal favorites.
It is it?
No, this is why you were definitely not
top 5
invited
cases.
to parties.
I'm not-
Yo, ML, top 5 cases ever.
It's Math Club cool.
Well, it'd be, of course, Learned Hand's first ruling from the bench.
There you go. All right. Let her finish.
So
Some of the better Felix Frankfurter cases I've always been fond of.
so I decided that I
Who
wanted
can
to be
forget John Marshall's first ruling?
I know
Is that
it's
3?
not fun.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I know
We
it's
got
not exciting.
Arizona versus
I think it's
narcolepsy.
exciting. I mean,
Yeah.
you could have at least, Pacifica versus California? Isn't that
I
the
could
big
have
first?
picked something. Matt versus Ohio could have picked something really exciting. So
Kramer versus Kramer?
great one. Great one.
Of course.
So I wanted to be a prosecutor because I wanted to put away the bad guys, and I thought that the only road to justice was through convictions and through locking people up who did bad things. And during my undergrad, I did some internships. I did one internship with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. I did another internship for over 200 hours with the Detroit Police Department. During law school, I did an internship with a county prosecutor's office. And it was during all 3 of these internships that I realized that what I believed justice was not justice. I believed that it was convictions and arrests, and that was the only road to justice. And going through constitutional law in law school, I realized that it was not justice. Can take many forms. It may be a conviction. It can also be an acquittal. It can also be a decision not to charge somebody or not to arrest somebody when you look into the facts and the information, or to not go forward with a prosecution because you realize that what you thought was right was not right and actually you were wrong. Justice can take so many forms, and when I realized it, and when I saw that prosecutors and unfortunately many law enforcement officials did other than what I thought they did, because I had them all on pedestals, and when I realized that they didn't all deserve to be placed on the pedestal that I had them on, I decided that I was going to be a defense attorney. And I opened my own law firm a month after I graduated law school, a month after I got sworn in. I opened my own law firm, and I have been a defense attorney ever since. And it is a role that I not only take very seriously, but it's a role that I'm very proud of. And it's something I can't imagine doing anything else. And after this case, you asked about exhaustion and being tired, and that happens a lot during trials for me because I take on so much responsibility for my client's liberty and their rights and standing between them and a potential prison sentence. And it can be very exhausting. But I've been asked by friends and family if I would consider doing something else, and I really don't. I mean, this is all I want to do is to be a criminal defense attorney. I can't imagine doing anything else. I really can't. I'm very proud of it.
You don't want to do patent law and sitting at...
No. I know people who do, and they love it, but it's just not my jam.
So how do you get, and feel free to say pass on this because it's kind of a personal question, but how do you get paid for 2.5 years of legal work from a family that doesn't have very many means, where you have to put everything you possibly can into this case to have a chance of winning? Do you just eat that? I mean, how do you keep your practice going? I mean, you're not here wearing rags. You obviously, are able to take care of yourself.
I have other cases. It's not the only case I had. There are some cases that people can't pay for counsel. I spent parts of my career and continue today to do assigned work, and I do assigned cases. The majority of my practice is retained work, people who retain me to represent them. Some of my cases are assigned by the county, by different counties. I said early on in my career that I don't believe that an individual should have low-level representation just because they can't afford to pay the person that wears the Brooks Brothers suit. And I still believe that. I don't believe that attorneys should walk away from clients because they can't pay them. I think if we take on that responsibility to represent somebody, I think we should see it through. And unfortunately, there are cases where we have to eat that money, where we lose a lot of money. Some attorneys withdraw. I'm sure that my accountant would say that that's the right decision to make, and to not eat that money. But I personally, I can't imagine walking away from a client that I've been with for a period of time because they can't afford to keep me going.
You didn't end up with a couple of horses out of this deal, did you?
I didn't. I don't have any horses.
Good.
No.
That's a lot of work.
I did hear through the grapevine, sitting waiting for another case in another county one time, that one of the horses may have been placed up there. But
Oh, really?
I did. Yeah, they didn't realize I was sitting there.
Okay. All right. Good.
Interesting.
They didn't leave any guns near that horse barn, though.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, good. Lesson learned. I want to ask you about this documentary because early on, Karen McDonald was very proactive, let's just say, in prosecuting the case in the media. And as a member of the media, I am never going to criticize a public official who speaks about what they know. So I'm not here to criticize Karen McDonald there. But there was some point where we had invited her to come on the show, and she was interested in coming on the show. But there was some rulings or maybe some discussions in the courthouse where it was thought, you know what, we probably should pull back a little bit. We don't want to try this case in the public. I think the judge had made it clear to people, hey, let's dial it back a little bit. Unbeknownst to all of us, and I imagine unbeknownst to you, until after the case concluded, there was a film crew recording, if not every moment, most of the moments. And shortly after the conviction, a documentary appears with some very candid inside access to the prosecution team. What do you make of that?
I was shocked, actually, to see the level of involvement that film crew had with the prosecution. I personally had been contacted for 2.5 years from various media outlets to give statements, to get involved, to give them information, and I declined because there was a gag order. The defense sought a gag order because of the comments being made by the prosecution, so Shannon and I worked to get that gag order in place, and it was mutual. So we couldn't talk to the media, and neither could they. When I saw the level of involvement that film crew had, and for the amount of time that they were involved, I was shocked. I was shocked. And one of the first things that I thought of was actually Judge Matthews, and what she was going to think about that if she had seen the documentary, what she was going to think, because she also was, she clearly didn't want the media coverage and didn't want all of the comments in the media and the court of public opinion and all of that. She didn't want all of that because she granted the order. So I was very shocked. And I think the part that really hit me was watching David Williams giving an interview in the middle of James's trial, sitting in his office, giving an interview to a camera.
Tell people who David Williams is.
David Williams is a deputy chief prosecutor.
Okay, because we don't know who all the players are.
Yeah, he's the deputy chief prosecutor to Karen McDonald. And he was sitting in his office, what it looked like was his office, giving an interview about what he was going to be doing later that afternoon in relation to my case, in the middle of our trial. And I remember just watching it thinking, I can't believe you guys had these camera crews this whole time. It felt, I'll be honest, it felt like a huge betrayal. It felt like very backhanded. It felt very much like they just wanted the publicity and they just wanted the recognition.
Maybe, but it was embargoed until after the trial. So would it really? I thought it was unusual. McDonald actually carried forth the case herself in court, so I could see how you would feel that way. But at the same time, so what if they're documenting it because it's not getting out there? Or do you think things they told the documentary crew were leaked?
I don't know that anything they told the documentary crew was leaked, but I also wonder what wasn't in that documentary that was covered during while those cameras were there. Like, was there information that was given to those cameras that maybe I was never made aware of? Were there conversations? Likely there were conversations that were had. I would never want a camera crew sitting in my war room while I'm getting ready for a trial. I wouldn't want that for a number of reasons. Yeah. But it makes me wonder what information those camera crews had. I mean, the documentary was obviously very prosecution focused. It was very prosecution friendly, which is not what I believed it was going to be. I also didn't believe it was going to be a Hulu documentary. But it makes me question a lot of things about the involvement that camera crew had.
Now, you did an interview with them, right?
I did.
Yeah. But when were you aware that they were actually preparing something?
I was not aware. So I was approached after the trial.
Okay, so you didn't know have you heard from the judge? Has the judge said anything about this?
I haven't talked to the
because I'm never going to criticize a public official for giving unfettered access to the inner workings of government. I think that's crucial. I think it helps us learn about our government and figure out why decisions are made. And I think that fly on the wall perspective, while with the convictions, may serve Karen McDonald very well. If they had lost the case, that documentary could have been, here's a look behind the scenes at the losing team in a historic trial. It could have.
But would we have actually seen it if they'd lost?
So I don't know what their agreement was. I don't know if they had an agreement where whatever we find, we're producing a documentary. I can't believe that even with all the money that the big media players have, that they would have said, yeah, if you lose, we're just going to eat it. But the fact that it didn't come out afterwards is that not consistent with the gag order? What somebody spoke after the trial? I mean, you're speaking after the trial. Why couldn't they have their say in the same way with this documentary after the trial?
None of what I'm saying now was filmed during the trial and while the case was pending. And I think that is, in my mind, that's a difference.
So the fact that they were speaking to the media, whether it was being disseminated in real time, in your mind, is a violation of the gag order.
Ultimately, that's the judge's decision. I don't think that there have been any motion. I haven't filed anything personally about it, so it's kind of a moot point. But
can't the judge say, hey, knuckleheads, Tuesday, 9 a.m., my courtroom. What the hell's with all these cameras?
I think we would have to file a motion for that.
Really? Judges can't just from the bench say, I did have a gag order thing here, and I want you to come in and explain me how you did not violate my gag order by talking.
I guess she could order them to appear.
Well, excuse me. The reason I ask is I mean, unless it has any bearing on the appeal, I don't know why you'd want to go back and pick a fight that really is not going to further anybody's cause. But I think back, get the bell ready, Mark. When we got Kwame Kilpatrick's text messages, one of my editors, great editor, great journalist, had a law degree, said, "Oh, when the judge finds out that there's a secret agreement and that there had been a lie told to the court, he is going to be outraged." And so one of the interviews we scheduled was to go see the judge. And we sat with him in his chamber and said, well, Judge, did you know at the same time they were telling you they weren't telling you this? And he goes, oh, wow. I'm like, you're not outraged? He's like, no. Like, should they have done that? No. Are you going to call him to court? No. I was like, well, I guess. So much for what my lawyer editor said was going to happen. I mean, is this a case where the judge is like, you shouldn't have done that. But hey, I got another case. I got golf. I guess maybe judges don't all golf, but have you ever seen a judge in a courthouse after noon on a Friday? Test this theory, folks. It's very rare. The one guy who I used to see consistently on the bench after noon on a Friday in Wayne County Circuit Court died while still serving as a judge, probably because he was working so hard. So I don't know. There were a lot of things in this case that came up where I was like, wow, okay, whoa, okay, that's a head scratcher. But when the documentary popped up like almost immediately after the case, I was like, first of all, that's a pretty good production team that they could knock it together that fast. But I'm like, I wonder if the judge knew this was happening. I wonder if the judge would be outraged. And
I have to believe she didn't know it was happening when it was happening. I mean, I have to believe she didn't know when it was happening.
Well, wouldn't that, if she did know, wouldn't she have to tell you? I mean, isn't that sort of an ex parte type of thing where?
I would assume
which
so.
means one side is only talking to the judge. I mean, the judge has got to keep both sides in the loop. You can't have those side conversations.
Right.
That's another partay you weren't invited to, I guess.
Partay. I don't get invited to a lot of partays.
That's what I heard with the constitutional law thing. Arizona
My
versus
con law professors would be very proud, by the way.
Michigan guys, right?
Another thing from the trial that I wanted to ask you about, because like I said, I didn't watch all of it, so I don't know if he ever came up. But Ethan had a brother, Eli, or half brother, just James's son. How much did he come up in the case to maybe show how attentive Dad was or wasn't? Because he didn't live with him. He moved out because of Jennifer, and I guess that's the second part. I've always kind of felt like Jennifer really wore the pants in that house, and I don't know if you care to speculate or talk about that.
Well, I think there was a lot of information that was put out early on that never actually became part of the trial. So he didn't come.
He was never part of it?
No,
Couldn't
not
help,
during mine.
Couldn't help you in any way?
No, I don't think he helped or hurt. Again, my focus of the trial was not necessarily all of the other kind of the other things, the collateral issues that the prosecution was trying to focus on, like some of the stuff that we saw in the media early on. I was focusing just on James's knowledge and the things related to that.
Okay.
So I think you said earlier that James was never going to testify, right? That was never part of your plan?
I don't think I said that. I think what I said was my defense was not going to change regardless of who went first. There's always the possibility that a client can testify. I'm a firm believer in your rights, and you have the right to remain silent. And in this case, we just felt that right was more important than him testifying. The jury got to hear from James through police interviews, through other recordings, so they got to hear from him. And he said in those recordings what he would have testified about.
I think people are always amazed. It's like, well, if I was on trial, I would get up there and tell my story and plead why I'm innocent. But the fact is, most defendants don't take the stand.
Yeah, it's actually more rare that they do take the stand. From what I've heard, I do have it happen in my cases. Not all the time, but I do have it happen. But again, if I don't think it's necessary, then
well, doesn't it open them up to?
Opens them up to cross-examination,
yeah.
which is something that we as defense attorneys can't control necessarily.
So with Jennifer Crumbley, again, rightly or wrongly, I'll put myself among the people who said, I don't know if they should go to jail, but I don't really like these guys.
No, I thought they were guilty of being bad parents.
Yeah. When Jennifer Crumbley started testifying, I will tell you that I saw her in a different light because there was more context put around some of these messages. So get the bell ready, Mark. When I ran for city council, my opponent put out a piece of literature where they quoted somebody who knew both of us and said, "Hey, I'm so and so. I know Letitia and ML. I worked with ML. ... Letitia is my choice because she's this, that, and the other thing. Blah 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 blah." Well, this was taken from a Facebook post, and when you see the full Facebook post, you're like, ML's a great guy. He cares about people. He gets stuff done. But I know Letitia. She's a great. I'm picking Letitia, and I was like, boy, you kind of left a big chunk out with that ... And in politics, that's the way it happens because there are kind of no rules. But when the prosecution is putting out Jennifer Crumbley text ... and the ... makes her seem a lot different. Is that dirty pool, or is that jurisprudence too, that you play to win, and if you got to give somebody an elbow in the face, you damn well do it?
I mean, is it dirty pool? Sure, it's dirty pool. But do we expect it? I mean, I expect it. I don't think that a prosecutor is going to put on anything favorable for my client. I think that's my job. If we want to show what the ... is, then we can show what the ... is. I think that's part of it. Do I think it's dirty pool? Yeah, but do I expect prosecutors to play dirty pool? Sure. I mean, unfortunately, that's what I've come to expect.
So Jennifer was able to, or Shannon Smith, her attorney, was able to put some of those things in context and I think soften the perception of Jennifer Crumbley by putting that out there. So I'd say, okay, it's good to hear from Jennifer in her own voice talking about that. But
I thought she was a terrible witness.
When she said, I wouldn't do anything differently,
Yeah.
What was your reaction to that?
So I didn't see it. I heard about it after. I'm assuming that was taken out of context. I didn't hear it. I still haven't heard it. I did hear what the comments were at sentencing around that comment during her testimony. I don't know that that's true. I think that both James and Jennifer would do everything different if they had known what the outcome was going to be. I don't know. That's why I think that comment was maybe just taken out of context.
Well, even a horrible person would do things differently just so they didn't end up in prison.
It's
so
not that though.
But
it's not that for them. It's not that for them.
So what bearing on Jennifer Crumbley's decision to testify and her, I'm going to say performance, for lack of a better term, on the witness stand have on your decision and James Crumbley's decision not to testify?
I don't really think it had any bearing on it. I make decisions in my cases based on my case and based on my trial and what's going on in my trial. I don't know that, again, I didn't really watch it, so I don't know that really had any impact at all.
So if she had been acquitted or if there had been a hung jury, would you have reconsidered whatever your strategy was regarding his testimony?
I would have seen how the trial played out. I don't know that I would have reconsidered it or not. I don't think that any two trials are the same. I don't think that any two direct examinations are the same, not any two cross examinations. So if her case had gone differently and James decided to testify, would they have gone harder on James? Would they have pulled more punches? Would they have played dirtier pool? Who knows? I don't know. But I make the decision based on what I think is best and talking with my client based on what we think is best for their defense and for their case. So I don't typically let outside influences play a role.
So she talks, she walks, doesn't change your position.
I don't know that it would have changed anything.
And what say does he have in it? Does he say, "Hey, counsel, I'm going up there. I don't care what you say. I got to be heard."
It's their right. It's their right to remain silent or to waive that right and testify. And I've had clients who have done that, who have wanted to do it and go up and do it their way. And that's their right. I don't think anyone's rights to be trampled on, especially by their defense attorney. So if that's your position, we can talk about the risks. You're well aware of the risks. It's your decision. That's why you ask them questions before they testify.
Has James had, or I don't even know if he could have, any communication with Jennifer or Ethan since the conviction?
I don't believe so.
But he could if he wanted to?
He could, yes. There could be communication. I believe that there was a no contact that was discussed at one point, but that's no longer.
Do you know if he has any interest in doing that?
I don't know.
And it would all be monitored, right? It would all be recorded.
Yes, it's all recorded.
Yeah, so who wants...
Well, I just think
Uncle Sam
you mentioned
listening
about
in?
how all the texts got on. There's a lot of salacious stuff with Jennifer and the affairs, and I just wait. I think maybe he had the chance to confront her even about that because you know how marriages work. It's a betrayal. I just am curious. Was that all a surprise to him when that came out, or did he know?
I don't know that it was or it wasn't. I think that there was some stuff that he wasn't aware of, but.
Ugh.
Some of this, again, this is an adversarial system, and people are playing to win, and hopefully they're hoping to win because they think victory is justice, and it's the same thing. But there was something late in the trial that came out about threatening calls that had been made by James Crumbley, and I remember when that story broke, I was like, oh, what did this idiot do now? And then we find out that the calls were like from a year and a half ago, and it's stuff like, if I ever run into that prosecutor, at the Turkish bath, I'm going to slap him in the face and steal their towel. It was sort of like, who hasn't?
It was venting, but still, it was not the best idea. And
it was kind of old, right? And then it pops up just as we're rounding the bend and headed for home. What was that all about?
I think, kind of like I said early on, and I've said a couple times throughout this conversation, is I think that he had to be painted in a negative light. I listened to the calls. I listened to them more than once, and I will again say that I disagree with the classification that the prosecution has given to them. I don't agree that those calls were threatening. Not physically. I think that they were venting. I've maintained that they were venting. I don't think it should have been held against him. And I said I've received negativity and negative messages and threatening messages, and they weren't that. The messages that I received were not that. So I personally don't find, I personally disagree with how those calls were classified by the prosecution, and I still do.
But they were old, right? I mean, they were over a year old. So
Many of them were, yes.
So pretend you had become a prosecutor. What would be the advantage of that? Because the jury is supposed to not be paying attention to all this stuff, right? By then you have a jury. The case has moved forward.
It's not just the jury. It's the public too. Because again, he can't be well liked. Because if he's well liked, then the neighbors of the jurors may not find it so difficult for him to be acquitted. But if nobody likes him, then you have to, as a juror, or as a supporter, you have to look at your neighbor who thinks that James and his wife are the scums of the earth. And you have to look at them and say, I didn't think that they did anything wrong and I found them not guilty. Or the prosecution didn't meet their burden and I found them not guilty. If they're not well liked, it's very hard for a person to be able to look at their neighbor and say that. If they are well liked, it's very easy. So I personally don't know that it was for the purpose of the jury to get the information. If it was, then that's a whole other ethical issue for the prosecutor's office. But I think that it was more of the trying the court trying the case in the court of public opinion. And if he's not well liked, if he's viewed as this violent, vicious, angry person, then his son just did exactly what he was taught to do, exactly what he was raised to do, and that's not James Crumbley. It's just not.
Well, it sounds like you feel that this was more of a smear than a prosecution.
I feel very strongly that a lot of the information that was put out was a smear more than a prosecution.
Well, for what it's worth, folks, we're going to invite Karen McDonald to come on the show, and I did reach out to them and say, if you'd like to invite the boss to come in, let's do it. Let's hear what she has to say about all this. So we'll let you know whether that's going to happen on a future show. I know that you do have other clients, Mariell. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add, or Mark, if you have any other questions, but it's been great to get your insights. It's been fascinating. I still don't know how I feel about the Crumbleys. I think we all wish none of this had happened, but folks, it is important that when somebody's accused of something, they have a competent and vigorous advocate. They are just doing their job, and when you get in a jam, maybe you want to call them. You may feel a little differently about it. So let's try and remember to be respectful to people. And if we're upset at the Crumbleys because their kid did something horrible and violent, why in the hell would you go to a keyboard and threaten something horrible and violent yourself and think that you're better than somebody else? I mean, please, give me a break. Anyways, Mariell Lehman, thanks for coming on the show. And perhaps we'll hear more as this case goes forward, or maybe you'll have another big case you want to tell us about.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me and asking me to be here.
And we are not inviting you to any parties, though. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
Just forget about that.
That's okay.
It's not going to happen.
Oh man, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Did I do that?
What a dork.
Does him wanting to play with us again mean that he's turning into a geek, or we're turning into cool guys?
Don't be a geek, but if you are a geek, have better than perfect vision. You can still make a phone call on a flip phone. You can still watch standard definition TV, and you can still listen to AM radio, but you don't because progress has made them all obsolete. You can also continue to look through eyeglasses and stick contact lenses in your eyes. Yuck. But like other examples, why do any of it when technology has provided a better way? Dr. Yaldo solves lifelong eyesight issues with custom LASIK and lens implant procedures safely, quickly, and painlessly. Over 50,000 Detroiters have asked him to do just that, and those who listen to this show are happy to tell us about how Dr. Yaldo has given them this remarkable lifetime boost. Mark and I have both had LASIK. I'll tell you what, I play a lot of sports. The contacts are driving me crazy.
Did you ever wear rec specs?
I think
the big
I think
goggles.
Whether or not you're wearing contacts or have Dr. Yaldo give you better than perfect vision, you still want to wear rec specs when that racquetball gloms on your eyeball, still rip it out of your globe, but out of your dome. But no, sports and contacts don't mix. Sports and glasses? Are you kidding me? No, sports and just forget sports. Waking up and having to put on glasses to see what's going on. No way. I like to know who's waiting to hit me with a hammer. So that's why I got the LASIK done. Dr. Yaldo can give you the same remarkable lifetime boost. Eyesight can be something you never have to even think about. You can see 20/20 up close and far away 24/7 for the rest of your life without any sort of archaic assistance. You got nothing to lose except those glasses and contacts. The evaluation is free. Call 1-800-398-EYES or YaldoEyeCenter.com. And when you call, tell them ML sent you. The other guy we think you should call is Luke Nowacki. He is not a doctor, but he has the cure for your anxiety when you look at the stock market. Maybe you're a big-time city official who can travel on the people's dime. Maybe you're a political contributor who gets hooked up with government contracts. Well, good for you, but bad for the rest of us. Now, if you're not among the swells lining your pockets with taxpayer money, if you're someone who actually works for a living, call financial specialist Luke Nowacki at 248-663-4748. We'll discuss strategies to grow your assets from annuities to individual retirement accounts to college savings. Make that call now. You've got kids and kleptocrats to feed, after all. Luke Nowacki. He's at 248-663-4748. And make sure you tell Luke that I sent you, because when you call Luke, he'll make it all about you, sweetheart.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through
Mosaic Wealth.
Inc. member FINRA-SIPC.
Mosaic Wealth.
Inc. is separately owned, and other entities and or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent.
Mosaic Wealth.
Inc.
So we've waited years for our City Connect jerseys. The Boston Red Sox have them. They're horrible. The Chicago Cubs have them. Terrible. Two of the most iconic franchises in baseball. Well, guess what? Who has better gear than Boston and the Cubby Bears? Your hometown nine, the Detroit Tigers. Yep. Not anymore. The City Connect, lame.
Oh, you're not a fan?
Lame jerseys.
There it is.
No good. Yes, if you're watching us, if you're a Patreon subscriber, if you're a member of the Soul Patrol, you are looking at some of the ugliest threads to ever adorn your Motor City kitties. Of course, they say Motor City across the front. Okay, not terribly.
I don't hate it as much as everybody else seems to hate it, but I don't know why baseball needs to do this, because baseball is so rooted in tradition, right? You know, they're the slowest sports entity to change, Major League Baseball. It takes them forever to change. So why are they rolling out these new uniforms? Oh, because people will buy them.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's all a money grab. But okay, so fine. Dazzle me with some alternative stuff. You know, there's some really cool Tiger T-shirts and sweatshirts and hats. This just says Detroit across the front. Oh wow, you couldn't think anything better than that? You couldn't give me like some really cool stylized lion or tiger?
Liger, yeah.
Sorry. My mom went to college. And it says there's the tire tracks across front. So we've been run over by a motorcycle now.
That's a little weird. I do like the Woodward 313 patch on the sleeve there. And
yeah.
The tiger eyes are kind of cool, but those are so small. It's just when you look at it, you see this tire track right down the middle that says Motor City,
and they're proud of it. And then they put a VIN number on the cap, and the VIN number is the year the Tigers were founded, and then the last two digits of every year we've won a championship. Yeah. Oh yeah, it makes me feel like my hat is the engine block of a car. No, it doesn't.
What's funny about that is I'm like, what is this VIN number? Like I didn't even put it together that it's the year and then 35, 45, 68, 84.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for reminding us. It's been 40 years since our last World Series, but. VIN number's not on an engine block, so don't get after me, motorheads here. But then they also talk about above the belt line and under the bill of the cap, you have tiger eyes. It's like the tigers are staring at you.
Yeah, but no one sees that.
Well, I'm staring at you, and you know what I see? Booty! You, Nike. God, can't you get these uniforms right ever? You are our Geek of the Week. Now, if you want to get in the game for the hell of a lot less than you'll pay for one of these broke-ass City Connect jerseys, come play Detroit. We'll give you a T-shirt, a nice-looking T-shirt.
Is there a VIN number on it?
There is not, Sam. There's not a VIN number.
I'll still wear one.
I'll talk to Justin about that. We'll see if we can work that out. But if you want to get in the game, I deal with a lot of people who like to play games. But there's one game I really enjoy, and that's volleyball and softball. That's a lot of games I enjoy. And Come Play Detroit has them all. Kickball, pickleball, sand volleyball. Whatever you want to do, Come Play Detroit will get you in the game. They're my choice for softball and volleyball, but they offer such a wide range of sports that you need to check them out because they play all year round, all over the city. They have one-day tournaments. They have seasons that last 8 to 10 weeks. You can sign up as an individual. You can be part of a small group, or you can sign up as a full team. Either way, Come Play Detroit's friendly staff will help you find the right fit. And if you know me, you know I like a good deal. 10% off if you go to comeplaydetroit.com and use promo code SOUL when you sign up. That's 10% off for promo code SOUL. It's a great way to get in the game and support our show. Go to comeplaydetroit.com. So we got a great email from my buddy Steve, who tells us a story about a band whose name probably wouldn't cut it these days, but listen for yourself. And in a minute, we'll talk about what you think about Elvis Hitler.
Beautiful corpse. Beautiful car.
Steve says, "Hi, Mike. This is a Room 7609 request, and this is my lame story. Back in 1988, my friend gave me tickets to the Elvis Hitler Dead Milkmen show at St. Andrews Hall. Now, I have to believe that's the Dead Milkmen Elvis Hitler show. This is not Puppet Show and Spinal Tap. God, I love the Milkmen, too. Anyways, another great Milwaukee band. I wasn't a big fan of either group, but went to support his brother, Elvis. Plus, I really enjoyed St. Andrews, of course, and the Shelter back in the day. During the concert, I met a beautiful, intelligent girl. She was an anthropology student at MSU. We hit it off and ended up talking the entire evening. I don't even remember the concert itself. At the end of the night, she gave me her number, and we went our separate ways. Her back to East Lansing. The next morning, much to my dismay, I could not find the paper she wrote her number on. I was extremely crushed. But alas, this isn't about me. This is about Sean." Insert Casey Kasem voice. "This request goes out to Sean. He reminds me of Elvis Hitler's hit song, Live Fast, Die Young, and Leave a Beautiful Corpse, because it sounds like what Sean was trying to do back in his youth. As far as the song goes, I think it was a takeoff, a ripoff of the Circle Jerks' Live Fast, Die Young tune from the early 80s. Sean probably knows about Circle Jerks because what didn't he do back then? Take care and go green. Go blue for Mark. P.S. Your lack of solo Johnny Marr songs is disturbing."
Oh.
Also, I have the Elvis Hitler album if you need a copy. C-U-N-L. E-L. Steve.
I'm intrigued by this band. I've never heard of this band.
Did they not play in Ann Arbor?
If they did, it was before my time because it said they were kind of defunct at 92. Okay. But they had their biggest song was called Green Haze, which used the lyrics from Green Acres to the tune of Purple Haze.
Yeah, I think.
Have you heard that? I haven't heard that.
I probably did back in the day because Elvis Hitler was like Goober and the Peas and the Way Outs and Water for the Pool and a bunch of other bands that would play at Rick's, and you just kind of assume that they made that little jaunt down 23 to play at the Rick's in Ann Arbor. Yeah. But yeah, that's. Elvis Hitler, one of those kind of shock names, and he had. It sounds like he had sort of a gimmick like Dred Zeppelin, where you have the Elvis impersonator doing reggae versions of Led Zeppelin tunes. He's doing TV theme songs and rip-offs of other kind of punk bands.
That is interesting, though, because it has the name Hitler in it, right? You get away with that in the 80s, but not now. Yeah,
and do you remember very early in Hill Street Blues, there were a couple guys who were always kind of hustling, and they pulled over a guy who fell asleep while he was driving. He was narcoleptic, and he was a comedian, and his name was Vic Hitler. And they were all like, dude, you're never going to make it. Vic Hitler?
No.
And the one guy who was kind of the biggest schemer of them all was like, no, guys, we got to invest. We got to just think about it. Vic Hitler, the narcoleptic comedian. This is really going to take off.
Yeah,
and so everybody in the precinct house was throwing their money in and was trying to support his gigs and everything like that. But Vic Hitler also did not break through, nor did Elvis Hitler. But
I like the song though.
I like. It
does remind me of Sean.
I like the Sean references. Yeah, I mean, what the hell wasn't Sean doing in the 80s?
Speaking of Memphis, I once went through there with an unhinged gal.
Yeah, I almost forgot.
I once went through Memphis with an unhinged gal. That's how the story started.
So you remember Sean, who of course remembers all of his exes fondly. He starts off by telling us about how he was trying to find clove cigarettes near a dog track for this woman. Who he play that again, Mark, so people can really.
Speaking of Memphis, I once went through there with an unhinged gal.
That was his segue.
So she's
Memphis.
He's an unhinged gal. But moments later, this is how he described her to last week's guest, Dan Wetzel.
I loved her.
And one more.
It makes sense.
We still say hi every now and again.
Okay. So
yeah.
He's still in touch with this unhinged gal.
1 minute.
That he loved. He's so weird.
She's an unhinged gal,
I'm glad he's getting rest this week.
But he loved her, and they still keep in touch. It kind of feels like our relationship.
Very true.
So Sean will be back next week. And if you missed last week's episode with Dan Wetzel, you missed a peach.
Oh, that was great. And the bonus episode, that was fun.
Oh, the bonus episode. Oh, yes.
It was nice of Dan to stay around for that.
What was it? The Slap Fest? What's the name of that sport?
Slap Fight.
Slap Fight.
Yeah, have you been watching it? Because it's really good.
I have not. But,
it's really rough.
I did end up getting in a little
Slap Fight of your own?
with Teresa last week. After the show, not that day, but later that week. And I was very glad that she was not watching Slap Fight because she would have put me down like a dog. So this is the part of the show where we thank our contributors. Okay, we got through that pretty quickly.
Oh, boy.
No contributors,
all the Patreon people.
You can go to the website and give us a donation the old-fashioned way with a electronic contribution through PayPal or through Venmo, or you can join us, a little thing we call the Soul Patrol, by going to Patreon and signing up. For $5, you get to watch the show, you get the video, you get the show before anybody else gets to hear it, and when you do get to hear it, it doesn't have those annoying insertion ads, so it's a better version of the show. It's just $5 a month, and then for $15 a month, you get all of that, plus the bonus episode. We now have about 4 or 5 bonus episodes. Erica Erickson, Dan Wetzel, great stars, great content. You can listen to them all once you join up. It's a lot of fun. $25 a month, you get an autographed copy of the Kwame Sutra, all the great stuff that we talked about before, and you really support the show. That's where you become like an Uber sponsor, but not like an Uber driver. I mean, you're like a super sponsor. $60 a month. No one has taken us up on this offer. You get all that other great stuff and some special show swag.
Hey, a little update on Erica, too. When she was in here, she was talking about, real quick, just an appearance she was having on Mean Girl Murders on
Yes,
the
thank
IV
you.
channel.
I saw that finally dropped.
Did you watch the episode?
I did not. I saw a link on her website.
It opens with her. It opens with Erica. And
on her Twitter feed, I should say.
Yeah, she, I don't know, it's the story in Warren. It's a horrific story where the 16-year-old stabbed the 17-year-old over a boy. Kind of her rival, Mean Girl Murders. But I thought Erica did a hell of a job. She's really good. So worth watching. It's available on Max.
She's terrific, and she talks about that in our episode here of Soul of Detroit. So you can find that in our back catalog. But go check it out on Max. Mean Girl Murders, starring...
Yep, and she's in season 2.
Season 2.
I think it's episode 5 or 6. I can't remember. But it's a good show anyway. Watch them all.
Honor student murderer. Damn.
Yeah,
so
it's a wild story.
Double E's got the scoop as usual, so check it out. And we love to get your feedback. Please write to us at mlsoulofdetroit@gmail.com. We have Frank, who weighs in and says, too bad Elric and his bad jokes and spins lost the day. Wetzel is great. Didn't let him talk.
Aw.
Frank's kind of mean. And then Karen writes in and says, Dear ML Watchdog, in quotation mark, Elric's. Oh boy, this is not starting out right. Can you explain the Freep's total blackout uncovering Faye Baydoun and the fraudulent $20 million grant she received in the 2022 state budget for her fake, not yet created nonprofit? Not 20 grand, $20 million cash over 2 years. It is one of the most audacious public corruption scams I've ever read. But I only read it because I subscribe to both dailies. Most Michiganders don't subscribe to either. Folks who only read the far more circulated Free Press have likely never heard of this scandal. It makes Kwame Kilpatrick and Detroit councilpersons taking $35,000 cash bribes look like pikers. Please advise, Karen.
I like that question. I read it in the news too, and Beth LeBlanc has done some updates on it too, but that's the only place I've seen. I haven't seen it anywhere else. I don't think I've seen it on the TV news either.
I don't know whether it's been on the TV news.
I haven't seen it. I watch too much TV news, but yeah.
And so this is going to sound like a bullshit move by me, but this is exactly why you need to subscribe to both papers. It's $1 for 6 months. And I see that Karen doesn't buy into my whole watchdog persona, but you know what? This ain't Pokemon, baby girl. I can't catch them all. And Craig Mauger,
I don't think
and
it was
Beth
a knock.
LeBlanc at the news.
Don't make it a knock on you.
Are terrific reporters, just as are Paul Egan at the Free Press, who's reported on many great stories involving the Department of Corrections and other places that the news hasn't reported on. There's a lot of bad guys out there, and we do our best to get them.
How does
tell
that work? Do you think Beth got a tip? Because if you read the article, she had went through a ton of records and stuff. So was it a thing where she gets a tip and it's her story and it's not going to leak out?
So the way it works is sometimes people tell you things because they know you're someone who does stories like this, and other times you go hunt where there's game. And what happened was Craig and Beth have been very, very aggressive, and I say that in the highest praise, in looking into these grants the state was putting out because we have so much money we can start giving it away to one-time things or the sort of things we would never, ever fund if money was tight. And one of the issues is $20 million given to this nonprofit that Faye Baydoun is involved in. One of the things that's really caught people's attention, and Craig and Beth dug this out, that they spent $4,500 on a coffee pot. Now, I think Ms. Baydoun has since said she would reimburse the cost of the coffee pot, but it seems like nobody in the legislature has decided they want to try and claw back some of this $20 million because they're concerned about what they've seen already.
The bigger problem is I want to say she spent close to $1 million on like a consultancy firm that didn't even exist when she got the grant.
Yeah,
which is pretty, I don't know, it's pretty lousy.
This sounds like something that bears further scrutiny.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to dismiss the Free Press's obligation to serve our readers who may not be news readers, which Karen rightly points out. She also points out a more tragic fact, which is some people don't read either newspaper, which means there's no food for any of the bulldogs. But let me just suggest this. And again, if you want to take it as some CYA, that's up to you. But if the Detroit News has broken a big story, Should we stop the big story we're working on to try and play catch up, or should we continue to break a big story that they're going to wish they had? That's kind of how this works.
And people would say, well, you can do both, but the fact of the matter is they can't. There's no money. There's the money, the cuts. I don't need to tell you this.
Yeah, no, sometimes we will play catch up on a story. Both newspapers have done a lot of good work on Lee Chatfield and some of the debacle that's going on with the former Speaker of the House. But sometimes they get one and we get one, and then the public ends up with two. Mm-hmm. But if the news got one and then we chased, then we'd both have one, or maybe we'd find out something they'd miss and you'd have 1 1/4. I wish we got them all. I totally love Karen's challenge, but the fact of the matter is if they get one and we get one, there's a net gain of one really good story as opposed to two people kicking the shit out of one thing. But I do hope, and this is where we really need to be putting the pressure on somebody, that state officials are now doing their job, that the Auditor General is looking into it, that some of the oversight committees in the legislature are doing something about it, because so far what we've seen, not saying that anything's been done wrong, but it does look like something we should be keeping a much closer eye on. So, Karen, you know what? We want to hold people accountable. We want to hold their feet to the fire. We want to ask tough questions, and I think it's only fair that you do the same. So thank you for your email, and I didn't put the thank you in quotation marks. I really do.
Oh, boy. People don't really know how to get to you.
We're trying so hard. Sometimes they're just mean. But I'm glad they're not all picking on Counselor Lehman. Mariell's great guest. Really,
she's good.
Appreciate having her on. She took on every question, and that's all we can ask.
Yeah. Any surprises from her that you thought? I just have one.
I guess I'm surprised that she likes James Crumbley so much. But I will tell you this: I've seen a lot of lawyers.
I don't think it's unusual.
Identify. Now, I'm not saying it's Stockholm syndrome, but I think to put so much of yourself into something, you have to develop some affinity for the client. And you also, when you see somebody constantly being attacked and you see some of their good qualities, I mean, again, like I said to her, one of the things that I always think about when I see people get locked up is like, who feeds the cat? And she basically said,
you're the kind of person that watches
cat dies.
You watch Star Wars like I do and go, what about all the rank and file people that worked on the Death Star? That are just doing their jobs, maintenance.
Yeah, just
janitorial services.
It was just
and
a
then
gig.
They blow the whole thing up. Come on.
Did you ever see? There's a YouTube
what about that?
series.
We're worried about collateral damage in Rafa, but not in the Death Star. Oh, that's because one's real and one's not.
Oh yeah. Well,
sorry about
let's
that.
not get into that. But there's a YouTube series that's got to be about 20 years old called Chad Vader, where he's the manager of a convenience store.
A relative.
And he's just walking around, he's like, you need to restock the shelves. And people are like, dude, you don't really scare me. He's like, I will use the force on you. They're like, okay, all right.
I mean, the stormtroopers, they're kind of, they're in the military, right? So,
yeah.
Not much for them. But, there's people that have to work on the Death Star.
Well, what if you're like one of the rebels, but you also run like a plumbing business, and somebody's like, we got the shitter's clogged on level 73. I'm like, okay, we do emergency calls, Even if you're part of the evil empire, you still got to use the commode. And
there's somebody running the cafeteria in the Death Star, too.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of small businesses going on there. And they just blew the whole thing up indiscriminately.
Yeah, you do not take the job making grilled cheese because you believe in the political philosophies of the emperor. It's because you got to feed all those kids back on Tatooine.
Probably born on the Death Star, right? Or actually, no, they might have kidnapped you and put you on there.
When with all these aliens, when you say you have a lot of mouths to feed, it could be on one person. It could be your mouth. So yeah, I mean,
so ridiculous.
Yeah, I never really thought about Luke Skywalker being an oppressor, but I guess you're right. Yeah,
well, I just thought there was a lot of collateral damage that nobody really cared about when the Death Star blew up.
Have you seen that?
I also watch movies and stuff and wonder, when do these people eat? It always drove me nuts. That was remember.
How do they eat with those helmets?
Well, no, I just mean all TV and movies. I know you're supposed to suspend that reality, but remember 24 with Kiefer Sutherland, where every minute I'm like, did he ever go to the bathroom? I felt like he never went to the bathroom in that series.
Oh, that's true too.
Shouldn't there been a 15-minute segment where he makes a peanut butter and jelly and just downs it and then sits on the shitter for like 5 minutes?
Or he's talking to the president. Sorry, I had to mute you. I was deucing. I didn't want to hear me.
I kind of want to go back and watch the series now to see how often he did just basic, normal bodily functions.
Well, who's the actor who has to pee in every movie?
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks, yeah.
Tom Hanks
so,
has a urination scene in
so,
almost every
so
film.
he acknowledges the realities of life.
Yeah.
But talking about the Star Wars and all the things that people didn't think of, I just ran across this clip on YouTube of some late night talk show host. I think it was Conan playing a clip for Harrison Ford of Mark Hamill imitating Harrison Ford.
Okay.
And I can't do any of the imitations really well, but Hamill does a really good Harrison Ford imitation, and he says, so I'm talking to Harrison, and I said, hey, we're just in this trash compactor, and it's all wet, and it's swampy, so when we emerge from the trash compactor, shouldn't our hair be wet, and shouldn't we, be like soaking wet?
Yeah.
And then he lapses into his Harrison Ford, he goes like, kid, it's not that kind of a movie. If that's what you're thinking about, you're in the wrong movie. And then they switch back to Harrison Ford. He's like, huh? That sounds like me? I mean,
yeah.
He was.
It also always bothers me watching Star Wars. You have all this amazing technology, right? They're traveling through space and hyperspeed and all that. But yet, whenever they show a monitor for a computer, it's always still to this day, even the new episodes will have
asteroid.
things. Yeah, it's asteroid.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts. I'm like, really? You have a hologram that Princess Leia pops out of, but your other screens are just that kind of garbage?
Yeah, no.
Update your stuff, Star Wars.
It's funny how many people were in the original Star Wars who are like, yeah, it's just a gig. Like Alec Guinness is like, yeah, it's a silly,
Oh, he's a snob.
And Harrison Ford is like, yeah, this is all kind of goofy and everything. And in fact, there was the sequel, The Empire Strikes Back. They had to redo things because when they started writing the first draft, Harrison Ford hadn't agreed to come back, and so they wrote it without him, and then he's like, okay, I'll sign. They had to switch stuff around, so it kind of changed the dynamic between, God, this is getting really dorky.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, what happened?
What a bunch of nerds.
Jeez, we're going to be invited to as many parties as Mariell Lehman. It's constitutional law. But by the way, I'm very proud this is the first time the word Frankfurter has been mentioned in this basement. It didn't involve a movie Brandon was watching.
Oh, Wieners?
I don't know, Felix Frankfurter. It sounds like a star of one of the films discussed on the Drew and Mike podcast, which we encourage you to listen to every chance you get. So, Mark, no Sean, but still a pretty good show, and I know he'll feel like you guys should just go on without me.
Oh, I know.
You don't need me, but we do.
Yeah, we miss you, Sean.
But the
person still say hi every now and again.
You don't need me. We'll still say hi every now and again.
But the person we really need right now is our friend Cyrus, who we asked to take us out.
Can you dig that?
Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Good night, then, until the same time next week, when once again we offer you
The Soul of Detroit.
This is
the Red Shovel Network.